There we go. All right. So chapter 19, part 2. In part 1, there was a lot of information. We got introduced to the concept of Doppler. What is the definition of Doppler? The fact that Doppler is a formula. The machine only understands math, so you have to bring in the common sense and the logic, how angles affect this or that, um, a lot of stuff. Then one of the biggest things to remember is the relationship with the Doppler shift and everything inside the formula. And the fact that as your Doppler shift changes, so does your color, and so so does your waveform. And so that's very important for you to kind of just click in your mind. All right. Then we brought in aliasing and what aliasing meant, which is you going over the limits, another important concept and another formula for you to know. Nyquist limit equals PRF divided by 2. Now we need to figure out if we have aliasing and we come across aliasing, how do we fix it? Okay. So the book gives you 5 ways to fix aliasing. Number 1 and 2 is to increase your scale. Number 2 is to go shallow, so your depth. Number 3 is to lower your frequency. Number 4 is to have a baseline shift. Let me just write it simpler. Move baseline. And number 5 is to use continuous wave. So I'll go through each one so you can understand the pros and cons. For scale, there are pros and cons to scale, but that comes back in chapter 20. So scale, I tend to kind of not go too much in depth because it comes back. So fixing aliasing. So when you have aliasing, your waveform, your velocity, your blood is moving faster than your Nyquist limit. Your Nyquist limit is your limit. That is how much you can handle and still measure things accurately. Okay, so have that in your mind that you have a limit. The machine has a limit, and anything on that limit or less, you can measure it. You can have an accurate waveform. But if you go over that limit, that's when it becomes aliasing. So at the limit or less, you can measure it, you can be accurate. That is that maximum limit that you can handle. Now you can adjust that limit. Okay, and this is where we're going to get into. You can adjust that limit. So if you're going 50 miles per hour on the highway and the speed limit is 45 miles per hour, that is your speed limit. In this scenario, you are speeding. So the consequence is that you can get pulled over and get a ticket. Okay. A way to solve this problem is for you to get off that road and get on a different highway where the speed limit maybe is 55 miles per hour. If you can find another highway where the speed limit is higher, well, now that the speed limit increased, you're golden because you are under that limit. So what was speeding before now is no longer speeding. So you didn't slow down by any means. You kept your 50 miles per hour because you're a speed, excuse me, a speed demon. So you're like, no, I'm keeping my 50 miles per hour. I'm going to Chipotle. But if you are running through a 45-mile zone, speeding. So one way to fix it, go on a different highway that has a higher speed limit, and now you're fine. Okay, that is what your scale does. Your scale says my wave is very big. My wave is too big. This is my glass ceiling right here. This is my limit. This is your scale right here. So these are all numbers, all velocities, and they have a limit right there. And because your wave is going over that limit, it breaks that glass ceiling. Now you have aliasing, and we'll get into like the shape of aliasing in chapter 20. But now you have aliasing, which is an artifact that you do not want. So in order to figure this out, and excuse me, in order to make it better, you say, well, what if I can increase my limit and put it up here? Well, if you do that, you just fixed aliasing. You increased your limit so that you can be faster or a bigger number than your wave. So that's basically what increasing your scale is. And you do it on the machine, it'll say scale, and then you just turn a little knob and you increase it. Okay. So your number gets bigger. If your number before was, let's say 10, now maybe is 16. So your number you became bigger. And these are all velocities. Okay. So these numbers 10 and 16 are velocities. And we know that 16 is a faster velocity than 10. It's like saying 16 miles per hour versus 10 miles per hour. 16 miles per hour is faster. So when you increase that, when you increase your scale, your number gets bigger because you are trying to go faster, and faster is a bigger number. And that solves the problem because aliasing is going too fast. So if something is going too fast, you need to go faster than it. Okay. So the only time that you should be increasing your scale is to avoid aliasing or to get rid of aliasing. That's the only time you should be increasing your scale. So when you increase your scale, you're going to focus on fast flow. Okay. And that's why we use it for aliasing, because aliasing is supposed to be fast flow. Okay. So when you increase your scale, that's where your focus goes. And then this has a negative. If you focus on fast flow, you're going to ignore slow flow. Okay. But that's in chapter 20. So that's increasing your scale. Any questions there about increasing your scale to get rid of aliasing and why you would want to increase it? Any questions? No? Okay. Now, what happens if you decrease your scale? If you decrease your scale, well, you made things worse. Because let's imagine that your scale was here and you have aliasing. You see this little top piece gets cut off and placed down here. So you have aliasing right there. Okay, and let's say you decide to lower your scale for some reason. Now your scale is here. So this becomes your new limit. Before, I just had one little piece chopped off. Now I have all of that. So I just made aliasing worse. Okay, that's no different than going back to the 50 miles per hour at a 45 mile per hour speed limit. And then you have the idea of getting off this highway and going into a residential where the speed limit is 30 miles per hour. So when the speed limit was 45, you were speeding, okay, because you were going over the speed limit at 50. So you were speeding when the speed limit was 45. And now you said, no, I want to go to 30 miles per hour for my speed limit. Now you're still speeding, but you're speeding worse. Now that ticket becomes a lot worse. In fact, I think once you hit a specific over the limit, and it might be 20 miles per hour, like when you go over the limit by 20, I think it's 20. And it's whatever the difference is, right? So if I'm going 50 and the speed limit is 30, the difference is 20. I think that when you go over that 20 over limit, it becomes criminal. So it's no longer a speeding ticket that you go and you pay and whatever. At this point, I think it becomes criminal. Like what's that word? What's that term? Danger. It's some term they use for when you're being negligent and when you're driving, and they call it criminal. So again, before you were speeding, but now you're speeding worse. So the same thing when you lower your scale. If you lower that scale when you're already aliasing, now you just made the aliasing worse. Okay. Shallow. So now they're saying to go shallow. All right. Anytime you have a Doppler question, okay, and you have to remember this. Anytime you have a Doppler question, it could be they're asking you about color, they're asking you about pulse wave, they're asking you about continuous wave, they're asking you about aliasing, um, anything that deals with looking at the movement of blood, that's Doppler. So whenever you have a question in front of you that pertains to Doppler, you want to remember two formulas. And you can write on your exam, you can write on a little board, a piece of paper they give you. So these are the two formulas that I would write down absolutely next to axial resolution for sure as well. So these are the two formulas, the Doppler shift formula and your Nyquist limit formula, because these are the two formulas that deal with Doppler. Okay, they go hand in hand because one is telling you movement, the other one is telling you the limit for that movement. Okay, so they go hand in hand. This is no different than you driving and then always having a speed limit somewhere nearby. They go hand in hand. Okay, you cannot ignore it. So these are the two formulas you want to have in your mind, and then we'll see that both of them are going to be used here. Okay. So for number 2, it says to go shallow, which is your imaging depth. If you, just in case you don't remember, because it was a while ago now, depth has a relationship with PRF. Okay. Not with frequency, with PRF. Now, we always think about depth having a relationship with frequency because we say if I am shallow, my frequency is high, and if I am deep, my frequency is low. So we kind of relate depth to frequency. And yes, there's some truth to that. But riddle me this. If you are deep, excuse me, if you are shallow, is it possible for you to be using a low frequency? Yes, it's possible. Just because you're shallow doesn't mean you're going to make your frequency high. You can still be in low frequency and still be shallow. Is that the best decision? No, because then you're not taking advantage of the fact that you're shallow. Okay? But you can you can do an entire study that is shallow and use low frequency. Nothing's going to stop you. Okay? So this goes to show that frequency does not have a direct impact on depth, right? Like if I change my frequency, my depth doesn't automatically change. If I change my frequency, I manually change my depth. Or if I manually change my depth, I manually adjust my frequency. There's no domino effect there, okay? But with PRF, there is a domino effect. The moment you change your depth is the moment you change your PRF. There's no way around it. So that's where the relationship is. And if you recall, I introduced this formula to you all that I said it was just a formula to emphasize relationships and not an actual, excuse me, a real formula. So depth equals PRP divided by PRF. The two on top are directly related, and the one on the bottom is inversely related to each. So they're saying to go shallow. I draw my arrow pointing down because shallow to me is a smaller number. If you were at 10 centimeters and you change your depth to 5 centimeters, at one point you were at 10 centimeters and now you are at 5 centimeters. Okay, you went shallow and your number became smaller. So that's why I draw my arrow pointing down, because it means that my depth, my number, went down, became smaller number. So the relationship here is inverse. That means my PRF goes up, right? So if my PRF goes up, I go back to my Nyquist limit formula. That's why I always need both of them here to see which one I'm going to use. So my PRF went up. It means my Nyquist limit also went up. They're directly related, right? They're both on top. And if your Nyquist limit goes up, Well, that is your speed limit. That is what you're trying to achieve. If something is speeding, you want the speed limit to get higher so that the blood is no longer speeding. Okay? It's no different than increasing the scale. Okay? And for that reason, I'm out. Right? That's what the sharks say. For that reason, I'm out. Um, for that reason, I tell students this: Nyquist limit equals PRF equals scale. The way that you adjust your scale is simply by turning a knob. The way that you adjust your Nyquist limit is through the PRF, which is through your depth. Okay, so it's a different way to adjust it, but the effects are the same. Okay, if I increase my PRF, I increase my Nyquist limit. I'm trying to avoid aliasing. If I increase my scale, I'm trying to avoid aliasing. So they all do the they all try to solve the same problem when you increase it, and when you lower it, then the same problem happens. If there's already aliasing and I lower my scale, that's bad. My aliasing got worse. If I lower my PRF and I lower my Nyquist limit, that's bad. My aliasing got worse. Okay. So I like to tell students to think of them as the same thing. Because if you come across a question that says that you have aliasing and you're trying to fix it, and you start seeing this, increase scale, lower Nyquist, lower PRF, okay? If you're just seeing this and you remember that they're all supposed to behave the same way, then this doesn't seem as confusing anymore. Because if you don't know that they're basically doing the same thing, you have one that says to increase the scale and the other one says to lower the Nyquist limit. So this can get a little bit confusing. But if you know that they both behave the same way to fix aliasing, then that really helps to narrow things down. And if you know that you're supposed to increase your scale, or at least to get bigger, then you know that this is the answer, and it's very, very easy to eliminate these two because you know that they're supposed to behave the same way. So if this goes up, it's very easy to eliminate these two, and then maybe D is another one that you might be going back and forth with, because on the exam, the whole goal is for you to always narrow it down to two, because two choices will always be, possible ones, and then you find the one that's best. Okay, but it's better to deal with two choices than to deal with four. So if you can knock out two from the beginning, then it's like, okay, good. Now I'm down to two. Now let me see if these two are similar or if they're completely different things, and maybe it's an easy question. So try to remember that your Nyquist limit, uh, the Nyquist limit equals the PRF, because the formula says Nyquist limit equals PRF divided by 2. So that's fine. But try to remember that it pretty much equals your scale. Even though you adjust them differently and they do different things, they achieve the same solution when you move them accordingly. All right. So that I think that sort of helps students to simplify these three concepts here. And so that's number 2. Number 3 is to lower your frequency. And this is why we need both formulas, because now frequency is not in my Nyquist limit formula. PRF is not frequency. If in the exam they're asking you about PRF, they're going to say PRF, or post repetition frequency. Okay, they're going to say that. If they use anything else, transmitted frequency, transducer frequency, or just 5 megahertz, 2 megahertz, that's just frequency. That is not PRF. Okay, for it to be PRF, it will need to say PRF. All right. So for number 3, I am going to use my Doppler shift formula. And number 3 says to make my Doppler shift, number 3 says to lower my frequency. And based on the formula, frequency and Doppler shift are directly related. If I lower my frequency, I lower my Doppler shift, which means I see less color and my wave becomes smaller. Okay, that's when you lower the Doppler shift. So that's my way to sort of process that. So visually, what does this look like? Visually is you have, and I'll draw these two as identical as possible, okay? Because now I'm not changing my scale. I'm not changing my Nyquist limit, okay? That was number one and number two. What I'm doing now is I'm changing my waveform. So when you are speeding, there are two ways to fix this. If you're going 50 miles per hour and the speed limit is 45, okay, you are speeding. You have two choices. Well, three. You can get a speeding ticket and call it a day. But you have two other realistic choices. One choice is go somewhere where the speed limit is higher. Okay, that's one choice. If you want to stay at 50, go where the speed limit is higher and you fix your speeding problem. Okay, the other choice is slow down. That's the other choice. Slow down. You don't have to go somewhere where the speed limit is higher. You can just slow down. All right. For number one and number two, we were increasing our limit. Our wave stayed the same velocity, but we increased our limit for number one and number two. For number three, we said, no, 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 that's it. My limit is staying the same. We're not changing it. So let's call it 10 and 10. My limit did not change. In here, I'm aliasing, right? I'm going over my limit. But in here, I'm not aliasing. And that's what number three is. It says, why don't you make your wave smaller? And you achieve that by lowering your Doppler shift, because your Doppler shift is your waveform. So that's the other solution. You actually affect the velocity itself, the Doppler shift velocity. That's what you end up affecting, and you make it smaller. So for any aliasing question, you want to lower the Doppler shift. You can do that by lowering the frequency. You can do that by lowering the velocity in the formula, right? You can do that by increasing the propagation speed, theoretically, according to the formula, right? You can do that by increasing the angle, because if you increase the angle, the cosine value goes down. And if that goes down, your Doppler shift goes down. So for any aliasing question, you want to lower the Doppler shift, not increase it. If you increase the Doppler shift, then this ends up happening. You were aliasing here, and now you increase the Doppler shift, and your wave got bigger. Now you just made it worse. Okay? So you do not want to increase the velocity. You do not want to increase the frequency. You do not want to lower the angle, okay? Because then that would increase the cosine value. You don't want to do anything that will increase your Doppler shift. All right? So that's number three. That is number three. And for the pros and cons for 2 and 3, for 2, if you go shallow, there really isn't a negative unless where you're imaging is not shallow, right? There's nothing you can do if what you're imaging is a kidney and the kidney is far away, and you try to find a different acoustic window, but it still didn't work out, so sometimes, even though number two says that's a solution, it is a solution if it's available. Okay. So besides that, there's no negative. And for number three, if you lower the frequency, that does help with aliasing, but your 2D image now gets worse, because if we talk about how the image is going to look, the 2D image itself is going to look, we know that lower frequency gives us less detail. Okay. So your 2D image is going to get worse. So that's a negative to it. Number four is to move the baseline. Okay. And here's this example. Let's get some pretty colors in here. Okay. We got some bright colors in here. And this is site B and site A. And I'm going to put a pulse wave on each site. Okay. Moving the baseline. So moving the baseline is when you have your spectral display that looks like this. And this guy is your baseline. Okay. This space for your spectral display right here, this space is shared by the top and the bottom of the baseline. Okay, it is shared. So if my limit here is 10, and let's just say it's right in the middle, so my limit here is -10. Okay, positive and -10. If that is my limit, okay, and I move this baseline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to share the space. So one will get affected. I will take from one and give to the other, or I will take from the other and give to this one. Okay, then this is what it looks like. I move my baseline up. Look how little I have up here. Okay, so and look how much I have down here. So this one becomes, let's just say -18, and this one becomes 2. So I took from the one on top and gave to the one on the bottom. And remember, before it was 10 and 10, 10 and 10, 10 up and 10 down, you put them together is 20. And look what I have here. I have 20. Okay, so you take from one and you give to the other, and then vice versa. You do this. Now this one becomes, let's say, -2, and this one becomes 18. Okay, so I took from this one now and I gave it to this one. And it's because this space is shared. It's not like you move the baseline and you're adding space along with it. Okay, it is shared. So when you move the baseline, you are affecting the Nyquist limit essentially. You are affecting that glass ceiling. Okay, when you move that baseline, you're affecting the glass ceiling. Now your job is to make sure that your limit is where it needs to be. And this is why I brought up this example. So in B, the flow is coming towards my transducer. My transducer is up here and my flow is moving this way in B. So in B, when I look at my wave, what I'm going to focus on is to lower my baseline. Because if I lower my baseline, my number up here becomes big and my number down here becomes small. And I'm okay with that. Why? Because my wave is going to be above my baseline. So I give that the priority. Okay? And I want it to be a big number because maybe this wave is fast. Okay? Because imagine if right here it was just 2. And look how big this wave is, I would have aliasing. Okay, so if your wave is above the baseline, just make that your priority. Lower the baseline so that you can appreciate the wave above it, okay? And your wave should take up, I forget what the number is, more than 75%, I think. Your wave should take up more than 75% of your view. So this entire view right here, I'm sure it's more than 75, but I know there's a specific number. But it should take up the majority of it, okay? The wave should take up the majority of it. Because then you can appreciate it a little bit more. Little things, little details can be appreciated. Now let's go to A. In A, the flow is now moving away from my transducer. But let's just assume that in A, I did not adjust my baseline. I left it just how it was in B. So down here. So my scale is still the same. My limits, my glass ceilings are still the same. But guess what now? My waveform is no longer above the baseline because my waveform is no longer moving towards me. Instead, my waveform is below the baseline. And because I didn't move my baseline, I created a very small limit and I just created aliasing. Okay, so this is how you can create aliasing improperly, right? Like you don't want to create it. But if your settings are not where they should be, you can create aliasing. So the solution here would be, let me move my baseline up so that my focus is on my away waveform. And now I give that waveform enough room to breathe. Okay. If there is real aliasing, like legitimate aliasing, moving the baseline will not fix it. Okay, it will not. If you create aliasing because you just have it placed wrong, then yeah, you can fix it. All right, so just a point that I want to make. Are we okay on moving the baseline? Good. Okay, good, good. So that's that. That's moving the baseline. And then the last one, oh, and there's no negative to moving the baseline. The last one is switching to continuous wave. Okay, switching to continuous wave, there is no Nyquist limit. I actually believe I read somewhere that there is a Nyquist limit, but it's so high that the velocity and the velocity of the blood will never go over it. So they essentially say no Nyquist limit. Okay. Aliasing is when you go over the Nyquist limit, when you are faster than the Nyquist limit. Continuous wave says, I have no limit. So how can you be faster than me? I have no limit. Okay. So when you switch to continuous wave, you get rid of aliasing because you have no speed limit. So there's no way you can be speeding if no speed limit exists. All right. So that's why switching to continuous wave can also solve the problem. In echo, we use continuous wave all the time. I'm not sure if we have some echo techs here. But in echo, we use continuous wave all the time. And we also use the peed-off transducer. And this is a dedicated continuous wave transducer, meaning that it only uses continuous wave. And continuous wave has no imaging. There is no imaging in a true continuous wave transducer. The ones that we use in echo, the sector, it has pulse wave and continuous wave. So we're able to see an image. But the moment we switch to the peed-off transducer, this is a strictly continuous wave transducer. Okay, it's tough to scan with this. I practice as much as I can, but it's tough to scan with this. Okay, because you have no image to guide yourself by. You're literally just hearing. You're waiting to hear a a wave. That's literally it. You put the transducer down, and all you see on your screen is this, your spectral scale. And then you're just moving it around, moving it around, moving it around until eventually you hear this. And you're like, oh, okay, okay, okay. I'm somewhere, I'm getting close, I'm getting close. And then you move it around ever so slightly, then you're like, okay, okay, I think I'm getting close. All of this is by sound. You just try to move in the right direction. And then eventually, you're like, ah, aortic stenosis. Hello. Okay. So it's tough because as ultrasound techs, we pride ourselves on what we see. And the peed-off says, nope, you're not going to see anything. You have to hear for me. So it's quite a change. Respect to anyone who knows how to use a peed-off correctly. Okay. That's how those are the 5 ways to fix aliasing. And you need to know those for the exam. Okay. If you can make sense of them, you'll be more than fine. Then the book wants to go into your gray, the gray shades of the spectrum. And all they're saying is sometimes your wave can look like this, and sometimes your wave can look like this, like very bold. It just means you have more blood. You're seeing more blood, okay? Because your waveform is made up of blood, red blood cells. So your waveform is actually your red blood cells. And if you see a little bit of it, it means that there's a little bit of blood that you're seeing that's reflecting back. But if your waveform is bold, it means that there's a lot of blood that you're seeing in that specific area. And that's why it's so bold. So they just want you to know that if the waveform is weak, it's a low amplitude, you're not really seeing a lot of red blood cells. But if your waveform is bold, it just means that you're seeing a lot of red blood cells, okay? And again, for echo, this is important because when we look at, let's say, regurgitation, okay, which is the leaking of a valve, if there is a leak but the waveform is not so bright, we can say, okay, there is a leak, things are coming back, but because it's not very bright, it means that not a lot of blood is coming back. It's still coming back, but not a lot of blood. But when you have that very strong, bright regurgitation, it means that there's a leak and a lot of blood is passing through that. So you're getting a really bad leak, okay? It's just like any leak where you can have a little bit of water come out or a lot of water just gushing out. So that's what they want you to know. Now they want to bring up color Doppler and how similar color Doppler is to pulse wave. Okay, they have similarities. They basically just want you to know that the same advantages and disadvantages pulse wave has, color Doppler adopts them. Okay, so remember that the advantages to pulse wave was that range resolution. Oh, look at that cursive right there. Range resolution. And the disadvantage. The disadvantage was the subject to aliasing. So that was the advantage and disadvantage to pulse wave. Color Doppler, same thing. It has the advantage of range resolution and the disadvantage to aliasing. How did pulse wave have range resolution? With the sample gate. How does color Doppler have range resolution? With the color box. Okay, it's kind of like the equivalent of sample gate. You can put your color box anywhere you want, and you always know where it is. And anytime you see color, it's always within the sample gate. Excuse me, within the color box. So you know where the color is coming from. Okay, so that's the definition of knowing the location of something, which is range resolution. And did I mention? Look at that cursive. And then the disadvantage. The disadvantage is that it's subject to aliasing. All right, and it's because the color Doppler has a velocity map, and that velocity map has numbers on either end. Okay, those are your limits. And if there's a limit, then maybe you can go over that limit, and that would be aliasing. Okay, so just because it has a limit, that's the reason why. Well, if it has a limit, then it could possibly have aliasing if a velocity is high enough. And with color Doppler, if you're scanning and you come across the noses, you notice that when you put a color Doppler on there, it's going to look very mosaic. The word is mosaic, and that means that it's aliasing. Okay, so it kind of proves that, oh yeah, I can see aliasing in color Doppler. Okay, so whenever we use continuous wave, which has range ambiguity, and we don't know where the velocities are coming from, what we can do is we can use color Doppler. So if I have two vessels and I run a continuous wave through them, remember, I don't know where my waveform is coming from. So once I get that waveform, I cannot definitively say it's from here or it's from here. So what we do is we can use color Doppler. Put it here. Okay, that's what it looks like. Put it here. Okay, that's what it looks like. And we say, oh, this is the one that showed me the mosaic aliasing. This one did not. So once I do that, I kind of keep an eye on, okay, this is the one that is aliasing. So when I run that continuous wave and I see, well, in continuous wave, I won't have aliasing. So let's say I use pulse wave and I have aliasing, I already have an idea. Well, my color Doppler showed me that it was here. So if I have a wave and it starts aliasing, I know it's coming from here. But thinking back at it now, it's post wave, so you always know where your wave is coming from. So I think I kind of just went in a circle here. Look at that cursive. That's probably what threw me off. So ignore that, because whenever you put a post wave, you always know where the waveform is coming from. But I guess the point that I was really trying to make was that you can use the advantage of this one to help you with the advantage of the other one. Okay. I guess that's really what I'm trying to prove here, because this one has the advantage of range resolution and the other one doesn't. Continuous wave doesn't. So you can use color Doppler to help narrow down where that aliasing is coming from. Okay, I just thought about an example. So time to redeem myself. So imagine that you have a vessel like this, a vessel like this, okay? And when you have a vessel like this that's tortuous, that kind of, curves and turns, there's going to be aliasing somewhere, okay? Now, you can start putting a pulse wave everywhere to try to find aliasing, and you can put a continuous wave somewhere to try to fix it. But what you do is you put color box here, color box here, color box here. You can put the color box on the whole thing, but let's just say like this. You're going section by section. And once you do that, you'll see, oh, this area right here gives me aliasing in color. So let me take my continuous wave and put it right there, because I already know that's where I'm going to have aliasing, and continuous wave will fix it. Okay. So you kind of like, this is, you use to hunt down what you're looking for, and then you use that continuous wave to go ahead and look at it there and get an actual good non-aliasing waveform. All right, so I think I may have redeemed myself. Let's see. Now we get to velocity maps. Okay, so give me a few seconds to draw my velocity map. Dark. It's like dark red lipstick color. And then bright red lipstick color. Now let's do blue. And let's do brighter blue. Okay. Let me take this, copy it, and paste it. Let's discuss velocity maps, or just color maps in general, because there are two. The first one is your velocity map. Your velocity map gives you that, velocities, okay? And velocities, remember, are a speed plus a direction. So they're going to give you a speed and they're going to give you a direction. That baseline separates your directions. So once you are over, say this is your baseline and you are above it, there's going to be a positive Doppler shift. And it would be towards me. If I am below my baseline, it will be a negative, negative Doppler shift. And it would be away from me. Just the, the opposite, okay? So don't focus on what the colors are, okay? Focus on where the color is, if it's below the baseline or above the baseline. So anytime they give you a vessel and there's color in it, don't stop there. Just because you recognize that color does not mean it is what you think it is, okay? Because we can invert the color, the velocity map. We can put blue on top and red at the bottom. Or we can use any other color we want. Pink, purple, greens, anything, oranges. So whenever you see a vessel and there's color in it, you look at your velocity map. Your velocity map is your key This is the one that decides what goes in that color box, okay? Not the other way around. So you look at this, you see what each color means, and then you go back to the vessel and you say, okay, now I confirmed what this color meant. All right. Excuse me. So your velocity map just gives you velocities. Okay, gives you the velocity, which is your speed plus your direction. Okay, nothing else. Over here on the right, you have what they call a variance map. A variance map has a bit more information. So if you notice in the velocity map, your colors are changing vertically. So this change of color is happening vertically. Top to bottom, bottom to top, it doesn't matter, but it's happening vertically. In your variance map, you also have that vertical changing color. But now we're going to add a side-to-side changing color. So let me add some different colors. So I'm going to add this color here, this color here, a yellow, then this light blue here, and then green right here. So now you can see that there is a changing color vertically, because I still have colors changing vertically, but I also have colors changing side to side. So with this comes additional information. You still have the towards me and the away from me, okay? So you're still going to get velocity information, but now they're adding this. So you get velocity information, which is the same as your velocity map, with the addition of a flow profile, meaning what type of flow. Okay, and the book gives you a very simple way to remember this. You have the left side of the map, and you have the right side of the map, and that's just your left and your right. Left starts with the letter L, and so does the word laminar. So this, any color on the left side of my map is laminar flow. And the opposite would be turbulent flow. That would be on the opposite side. Or I've seen some review websites call it variance or variant flow. I guess that's what they call it, a variance map. Okay, so just try to remember that the left side is laminar, and therefore the right side is the opposite of laminar, which is turbulent flow. Laminar is supposed to be normal flow that we discussed. Turbulent flow is supposed to be abnormal flow. Okay. Now, I need one volunteer because I'm going to ask you a question. So who wants to volunteer for this? Okay, Kirsty. Can you put are you able to turn your mic on, or is it only through messages?
I'm here.
Okay, cool. I'm going to give you a scenario, and I want you to tell me what the color is. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what I'm looking for, and you tell me what the color is. It's like playing Guess Who. All right. I'm looking for a color that is towards me. That's one criteria. That same color that's towards me, I want it to be slow. And that same color that's towards me and slow, I want it to be turbulent. What color am I?
Orange.
Correct. Good job. Okay.
Thank you.
So then if you're asked about this so that you can sort of learn how to read a map, towards me, my first criteria is towards me. So I am looking at everything that is above the baseline, because everything above the baseline is towards me. So that's how I narrow it down to these guys. Then they want it to be slow. Okay. Slow is anything close to the baseline, because the baseline is supposed to be 0, no movement. And if you're moving slow, you are close to no movement. Okay, like if you drive very, very slowly, people would say, it's like you're not even moving, man, because you're driving so slowly. All right. So anything that is close to the baseline is slow. Anything that is far away from the baseline is fast because you're far away from zero. So for slow, now I need to look at any color above the baseline that is close to the baseline. So it narrows it down to these two colors. And the last criteria is to look for turbulent flow. Left is laminar, so the right side must be turbulent. And that's how Christy got to orange. Does that make sense for everyone? Okay. Good. So those are the maps, all right? Those are the maps. Now, there's a really, I sometimes do this. Or do I do this in chapter 20 better? Aliasing. I'll do it in chapter 20. Okay, yeah. So this is how you read the maps. Okay, the velocity map and the variance map. So if you're asked a question about this, it should be very simple, where you should maybe recognize the map that you're using, or you need to pay attention to what each color means so that you can read the question correctly. Don't assume what the color means. The next step is predicting flow. Okay. If I have a transducer here and a vessel is like this, if blood is moving like this, it's very easy to imagine, oh yeah, the blood is moving towards me. Or if blood is moving like this, it's very easy to imagine the blood is moving away from me. Okay, so in this case, not a problem. But what happens if your vessel is like this? Then what? Because the whole towards me and away from me kind of goes out the window. Okay, the blood is moving side to side. It isn't necessarily moving towards me or away from me, to be honest. Okay, when the vessel is completely perpendicular like this. You can argue that if the blood is moving like this, it is moving towards the transducer. You can argue that. But in that same token, I would say, well, this same blood is going to eventually go like this. And isn't that moving away from you? So you can argue any of these two, okay? So instead, what we focus on is, what is the direction of blood? Is it left to right or right to left? Okay, the colors will still show towards me and away from me. The colors will still show that, above the baseline, below the baseline. But now we're looking at right to left or left to right when it's a completely perpendicular vessel like this, completely straight. If you have a sector image, most likely produced by a sector transducer, the echo transducer, okay? And you put a color box there. The book shows you this. Okay. This is what the book shows you inside the color box. It shows you red, black, and blue. And then they give you a color box. Because remember, you always have to look at the color box. And they give you the colors like this. So red is supposed to be towards you and blue is supposed to be away from you according to the color box. So to read this, to predict the flow for this, okay, I made up this little rule, and it's move towards away. Okay, that is the rule that I kind of made up, okay? And it just means that you're going to move towards the away color. So you start at the towards color and you move towards the away color. but this is where you start. It comes first. So you start there and then you move in the direction of where the away color is. Okay. Now notice that I didn't specify the colors. I didn't say from red move to blue. Okay. It's because the velocity map, the color map can change. So blue and red can mean different things. So instead, you use the terms the towards color and the away color. And all you have to do is, what is my towards color? Above the baseline. What is my away color? Below the baseline. So in this case, this is my towards color. So I start there and I move closer to the away color, which is the blue. So this is my direction of blood. My blood is going like this. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. And in the book, they tell you that this is your left side and that this is your right side. That's what they tell you in the book. Okay. So when you want to say, what is my direction of flow? You would say my flow is moving from the left side towards the right side. That is my direction of flow. Does this make sense? All right. Now, if you notice, black is right in the center. You have red, you have black, and then you have blue. Okay. And this doesn't make sense because if black is in the center, it means that there's no flow in the center. There's no blood flow in the center. And it just doesn't make sense. How can there be flow on the left side and flow on the right side, but no flow in the center? And if my blood is moving from left to right, then it's crossing that center part as it moves from the left to the right. So why is there no blood there? Okay. In chapter 20, we talk about angles. So what's going on here is that you have your color box, you have your vessel, and you have your blood moving like this from left to right. Okay, from left to right, making a straight line. In the center, your beam is shooting straight down. And on the sides, your beam is shooting like this. Okay, so what you end up having is right here, you have this. So this will be
one quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, like sometimes I've gotten sample questions like this, and I appreciate you labeling it left and right. However, some of them aren't labeled that way, and like I've had some that right is on the left side, like such as the patient's right, and then left is on the right side of the screens. So would that always be indicated if they're going to switch it on you? And if there's nothing labeled, would I automatically assume left is left and right is right, like my left and my right versus the patient's?
So for this sector image, this one I'm not sure about because this one is even tricky for me because I do echo, because for me, the right side that I see here is my left. So for the echoes, I'm not sure about, but I know that for the linear sequentials, in that one, when you use a linear transducer, the assumption is when you're scanning that the left side is actually the right side. So if it's not stated otherwise, that's what you should assume. And I'm going to get to the linear soon, so I'll explain that as well. I'll go into detail. For this sector though, yeah, this one's a little bit tougher because if you're echo, you know that your right side is actually your left side. So I would think it's all about where your indicator is. That's what I would think. And I think in the book, the indicator is on the left side. So that's why it's marking left. Because normally the indicator is actually on the other side. So wherever your indicator is, that should be where left is for the sector. Okay. I wouldn't get too confused about the sector. I would focus more on the linear sequential, the linear, which is the one I'll do next. Because if you ask questions, it might be more about that than this image. Okay. Okay. So for the why is it black in the center? So for A, let me just highlight it. So for this beam, for this beam that's coming like this, you're going to create this angle right here, which is this angle right here. For the other beam, let's make it blue, like this blue. You're doing this, and your blood is going like this. You're going to create this angle like this. Okay, and for the center, your beam is going straight down, and your flow is going again side to side, right, left to right. For all of them is going left to right. But depending on what the angle is, here you have an angle, here you have another angle, and down the center you have 90 degrees. And if you go back to the Doppler shift, 90 degrees has a cosine value of 0. So now in the Doppler shift, everything gets multiplied by 0. So your Doppler shift is 0, which means no Doppler shift, which means no color. Okay, so that's why in the center it's black. And that's why angles are so important. In chapter 20, we start with angles. So we'll talk about angles some more. Now for the linear sequential, rule is a little bit different, unfortunately. So again, you have your vessel going like this, and your blood is going side to side. And your job is to try to figure out, what is my side to side? Is it left to right, or is it right to left? Okay, that is your job. So in here, we steer our box, because we cannot steer our box in our sector shape. There's no steering, okay? But in a linear sequential, we steer our box. And let's say that we put the box like this. Let me copy this velocity map here. And the book gives you a color inside that box. And the color is this. It's an away color. Okay. So the rule is this. First, you need to be at an away color, which is the opposite of the sector, where you look at your towards color, and then that's where you start. Here, you actually need to look for an away color. That is your starting point. So first, you need to be an away color. So that color inside that box needs to be an away color. I don't care what color it is, as long as it's the color below the baseline. The second rule is that you're going to draw a line. Okay, and you have to draw that line from a top corner. Now you have two top corners. You have this. Why is this happening? Okay. You have this top corner, and you have this top corner. Okay, so you have two corners to pick from. But the rule says that when you draw a line, you draw a line vertically down from whichever top corner. And that line that you draw vertically down, that imaginary line that you draw vertically down, cannot run through your color. So this one is out, because that line runs through my color. So I don't pick that line. I don't pick that corner, excuse me. I pick this one. And I draw my imaginary line down. Once I do that, this becomes my home. Okay, so this becomes my home. And now just like what the color says, you're going to move away from home. So you move away from home, okay? Right where the color is showing, okay? You don't move this way. You move in the same direction the color is showing, but you move away from home. That's why it's the away color. And again, it's different than the echo one, which is you move towards the away color, but you start at the towards color. It's a little bit different, okay? So you move away from home. Now you do all of this work, and this is Christy's concern. You do all of this work and you make one little mistake, that you don't label your directions, okay? Because this could either be left to right, right to left. It all depends on what they're asking. So if they're asking on the screen, that's one thing. If they're asking on the patient, that's another thing, okay? On the patient, for linear sequentials, we know that this is my right side of the patient and this is my left side of the patient. So on the patient, it's backwards, okay? So if I were to say, what is my direction of flow on the patient? My home is on my left side, and my flow is going from my home, my left, to my right. So my flow is left, moving towards my right. Starting at the left, moving away towards my right. So on the patient, that is my flow. On the screen, then it's the complete opposite, because on the screen, this is my right side because that's my natural right, and this is my left side, my natural left on the screen, real world. So the direction of flow here is my home is now called my right side. So I start at my right side and I move away to my left side. So you see, it's completely opposite directions. Well, at least it's described as being opposite, but your flow is still starting here and moving this way. Okay, your home doesn't move. What you call your home is what changes. You call it left or you call it right, but your home does not move. It is still here. It's just like if you're giving me directions to get to your house. If I'm coming this way, you say, hey, when you get to this corner, make a right. But what if I'm coming this way? You're going to say, hey, when you get to that corner, make a left. Your home didn't move, but because I came from a different direction, you have to give me different directions, okay? So your home doesn't move. What you called your home is what changes. So if you call it right or you call it left, all right? Now, are they going to specify? I would assume so. I would assume they will specify on the screen or on the patient. If they don't specify, for me, how I would handle it, I would probably handle it on the patient, because that would be my inclination. Like, oh, I'm looking at it as a linear sequential, and I'm looking at flow, and my marker, is on the left side of the screen, which is the right side of my patient. So for me, if I was taking the exam and they give me no indication, I would say, well, my safest bet is to assume that I'm just scanning with a linear sequential, with a linear. And my left side is actually the right side of the patient. So that's how I would handle it. But I would hope that they tell you, what is the direction of flow on the patient? And it might be something so subtle that you could read over it very quickly, and miss that they're telling you it's on the patient or it's on the screen. Okay. All right. What happens if I do not have an away color? You're welcome, Christy. What happens if you do not have an away color? Because all of this is assuming an away color, okay? But maybe you don't have an away color, all right? So always remember, you look at the color and then you figure out what they're telling you, what they're giving you. So let's assume that instead I have this. And according to my velocity map, red is towards, okay? So I cannot go through this mess of imaginary line down, make it your home, because I am not at an away color, okay? Now, some people would say, well, invert the color box. Put the blue on top and the red at the bottom. Because now if the red is at the bottom and you have red inside your color box, then red means away. And that's a good effort. I respect that, okay? But remember, your velocity map determines what goes inside your color box, okay? Your velocity map determines what goes inside your color box, not the other way around. And if you flip one, the other one automatically flips as well because one governs the other. So if I flip this box and put blue on top and red at the bottom, that blue that's going to be on top, now my color box is going to be blue. And I'm back to the same problem. Blue on top means towards, and my color box has blue in it, which also means towards. So it does not solve my problem, okay? Instead, what you do is you steer the box, okay? You steer the box. If this angle of the box gives me red, then the opposite box will give me the opposite color, blue. It's crazy how it's always about opposites. If I get this here, then the opposite will give me the opposite, all right? But it makes total sense. So what you do is you steer the box like if you were doing a mirror reflection, because essentially that's what it is. It's a mirror reflection, okay? You cannot do this on the machine, like on, excuse me, you cannot do this on the exam. You can't say, let me steer my box, and then you'll turn something on the exam and it starts steering your box. No, you cannot do that. So what do you do instead? You draw it on your little board. You draw the box they give you with the, with the towards color, and then you draw a little mirror down the line and you draw the opposite box. And then that would be your away color. And now, once you do that, then you do your rule, okay? So this right here is red. And when I flip the box, now this is blue. So now I can do my rule. I can say I pick this corner because when I go down, it does not run through my box. This is my home and I move away from home. Okay, and on the patient, this would be the right side of the patient moving to the left. If I were to do that in my towards color and skip that rule, I would pick that corner, make this my home, and this is the left side of the patient moving towards the right. So in the right answer, I'm going from right to left. In the wrong answer, I'm going from left to right. Complete opposite answers. Okay. So just please, please, please do not look at a vessel and assume what the color is. The key is to look at your velocity map. That is the one that tells you what things mean. Because I'm willing to bet my top dollar that if you look at a vessel and the color inside the vessel was pink, you're going to look straight for your velocity map, because you're going to ask yourself, what the heck is pink? Okay. And that's the way it should be with any color. The thing is, we get used to blue and red and we get used to what they mean. So we assume it, right? We kind of like pick a shortcut. We say, oh yeah, blue means this, red means that. Okay. But treat it like if you've never seen those colors before. Okay. Because maybe that's where the answer is going to be. Like the right answer could simply be could simply be at, are you reading this color correctly? Do you know what this color actually means? Or are you assuming what this color means? All right, so that's predicting flow. Now we just have a couple of little details and we'll be done with the chapter. Ooh, I'm over? Holy cow. How much more do we got? How much more do we got? Okay, a few pages. All right, we're good. We're good. No panic. Don't panic, guys. Come on. Keep it cool. It's kind of like that that episode of The Office. It's one of my favorite episodes. It's called I think it's called Fire Drill. I think it's called Fire Drill. Is it called Fire Drill? I think so. It's really, really funny. And Michael Scott says, don't panic. Don't panic. But like, so the irony is that he's panicking, telling people not to panic. So it's a pretty funny episode. It's really, really is. All right. There you go, Gretchen. She knows what I'm talking about. All right. Doppler packets. So Doppler packets has another name, well, two names. It's called your packet size, and it's called your ensemble length. Okay, so you have to remember all three of these, unfortunately. So what does it do? You can either increase your packet size or you can decrease your packet size. And as you would guess, they would do opposite things, right? Increasing will do the opposite of decreasing, okay? So all of this is very repetitive. You just know one and you can figure out the other, okay? So increasing my packet size. If I increase my packet size, I send more pulses. Remember, your pulses are your eyes, okay? If I send more pulses, I send out more eyes, I'm going to see more. See more what? More color. Because Doppler package is strictly for color Doppler. So I'm going to see more color. Now, in terms of seeing more color, seeing less color, the one who always gets the short end of the stick is slow flow. Okay? Slow flow is the one that is always on the chopping block. Fast flow will always be there. Doesn't matter what you do, fast flow will always be there. So generally speaking, when we say see more color or see less color, the one that's really getting affected is the slow flow. Okay. Yeah, you might fill the vessel up more with fast flow, but it's really the slow flow, the one that's getting either eliminated or brought back or enhanced. So I'm going to send more pulses. I'm going to see more color, which means I'm going to see more slow flow. That's the one that's going to be affected. And anytime you see more, remember that key. I am more sensitive, or I increased my sensitivity. Okay, so anytime you see more, it's always about that sensitivity. And if I lower my packet size, just do the opposite for each one. I send out less pulses, I see less color, I see less slow flow, I become less sensitive, or I decreased my sensitivity. Okay, just the opposite. So where will you do this? When you're having trouble seeing slow flow. So if you have a vein and that vein is giving you trouble seeing the flow in there, you want to increase your packet size. Your problem is you're not seeing enough. The answer is do something to make you see more, to become more sensitive. That's to increase your packet size. Now machines nowadays don't really carry the word packet size. Maybe GE does. I know Philips really don't. Um, so if you're asking where is packet size, it might not be on your machine. It might be somewhere in the back on a sub menu somewhere. So we don't really adjust these. But for the exam, you have to know what packet size is, the different names for it, okay, and what they do. Now there's an effect that this has because you're sending out more pulses. So the moment you start messing with the number of pulses, this guy comes back. Frame rate, because frame rate is affected by the number of pulses. Okay. If you send out more pulses, you have to wait longer for those to come back because you send out more. So there's the key word. You have to wait longer. That's the key right there. And frame rate, what does it want to be? It wants to be fast. So the fact that you're telling it to wait longer means that you're going to lower your frame rate. You're going to degrade, worsen, lower your frame rate, your temporal resolution, because they're essentially the same. So that's the counter effect. That's the counter. And if you lower your packet size, well, it's less pulses, so then less time, then they will make your frame rate happy. Okay. Next one is power Doppler. power Doppler does not measure velocities. It is going to measure amplitude, which is how much of blood, let's say, because we use it for blood, how much blood is there. And it does that by measuring the amplitude, essentially meaning that if there is a lot of blood there, it's going to create a very strong reflection. If there's a little bit of blood there, it's going to create a weak reflection. Okay, and a lot would be a bigger amplitude, a stronger amplitude. Lower would be a weaker amplitude. The map for this does not have a baseline that divides direction. The map for this is essentially one color changing shades. So it's one color changing shades. And the brighter the color is, the more blood is there. The stronger the amplitude is there, the brighter the color is. Okay. The book does a really great job at giving you 3 advantages and 3 disadvantages. Okay, make sure you read that. The biggest takeaway is that it measures amplitude. It is very, very, very sensitive. So remember, when we want to see more, we become more sensitive. Power Doppler says, I am emo type of sensitive. Okay, I am the emo kid of Doppler. So this one is very, very, very sensitive. So why would you use the power Doppler? Whenever you need to at least see something, this is the guy that you use. Okay. And the example that I normally give is of testicular torsion, because you can, well, you can also have ovarian torsion. But if you have testicular torsion, that spermatic cord is where the artery and the vein, okay, that's where they live. And if you have testicular torsion, a knot is formed. And if you have a knot, then the blood vessels are constricted and they cannot, blood cannot get in and blood cannot get out. So the testicle, the testy starts to die. Okay. And if you get testicular torsion and it's been a while and the testicle is dead, then they have to chop it because it can lead to infection. And then you're looking at a real serious problem, for sepsis. So you don't want to get to that. So as you as a sonographer, they'll bring you in there and they'll say, hey, do a testicular exam. And we need to know if this testicle has any sort of blood flow in there. And you go in there and you put your color box and you see no flow. The problem there is that you are seeing no flow and you need to see flow. So the solution is become more sensitive because you want to see more. So you should become more sensitive and you start making all the adjustments to make you more sensitive. That is increasing your color gain. That is lowering your scale. And we'll talk about these two later. That is increasing your packet size, which is what we're talking about now. Okay. All of these things, lowering your wall filter. And again, we'll talk about that later. All of these things will make you more sensitive because that's what the situation calls for. And this is why instrumentation is so important. Because if you're doing the opposite of these things, you're never going to see flow. Not only that, maybe there was flow, but because you made the wrong adjustment, you took it away. You took this man's life, man. This is why instrumentation is so important. So you make all of these adjustments and still no flow. and you look at the doctor looks at you, you know, and then you say, I'm sorry, there's nothing there. Chop it. And then that's what they have to do. The grave mistake here is that you have another tool in your toolbox, and that's power Doppler. Power Doppler says, if you think color Doppler is sensitive, you haven't seen me yet. I'll cry you a river of how sensitive I am. So your last resort should be power Doppler, because power Doppler says, I'll pick up anything that is there. Anything. So this is your last resort. This is the one that's very, very, very sensitive. Remember, it does not pick up velocities. Its job is to show you there is at least something there. Okay, so there's no pulse wave here. There's no direction here. Okay, because velocities deal with the Nyquist limit formula, the Doppler shift formula, with directions. This has none of that. With angles, this has none of that. This just says, if there is a little trickle, I'm going to see it. Then if you want, put your color Doppler over that little area where I found the trickle and see if you can now find it and, put a pulse wave if you want to see the waveform, whatever. I'm just here to show you if there's anything there. I'm not going to measure it. I'm not going to give you if it's going slow, if it's going fast. I'm not giving you any of that. I'm just simply telling you if there's a little bit or if there's a lot. The concentration of it. That's it. Okay. The drawback to power Doppler, besides not giving you any velocities and things like that, because it has nothing to do with the Doppler shift, so it has nothing to do with aliasing, none of that stuff, is that because it's so sensitive, it is definitely going to worsen your frame rate much more than the other guy. Remember, we increased our packet size and it worsened the frame rate. This guy says, I am even more sensitive. So you can only imagine how many pulses it's sending out. So it really lowers your frame rate. And you also get this little pretty thing called a flash artifact. And a flash artifact is exactly that. It's a flash. Okay? Because it's so sensitive that any movement is considered movement. And that's what power Doppler is giving you. It's giving you some sort of color over any movement. So if a patient coughs while you have power Doppler on, poof, the whole screen turns into a flash. If the patient moves, or if you move the transducer a little bit too fast, you start to create color for power Doppler. So it's called a flash artifact because it's so sensitive. All right, so there's that. For ghosting and clutter and wall filter, I bring it back later, so we skip that for now. Crosstalk comes back later as well. And the last part is FFT and autocorrelation. And this is where we ended, ladies and gents. FFT is fast Fourier transform. And autocorrelation is autocorrelation. The few things that you need to know about this. FFT is what is the computer technology, I suppose, that processes pulse wave and continuous wave. So this is what makes these guys possible in some way. Pulse wave and continuous wave. Autocorrelation will process color flow or color Doppler. Okay, so your first job is to remember who FFT is responsible for and who autocorrelation is responsible for. Okay, that is your first job. Your second job is to know just a tiny bit about them. For FFT, you need to know that this guy is very accurate. And it's very accurate because it's going to show you, it shows all velocities. For color Doppler, you need to remember that this guy is very fast. And it's not very accurate because it shows you average velocities. Okay, so why is pulse wave accurate? How does it show me all velocities, pulse wave or continuous wave? Because in pulse wave or continuous wave, you get a waveform. And in that waveform, you can pick any part of that waveform and it will tell you what the velocity is. You can pick this part right here, the peak, this part, any part, and it tells you how fast it is. It's giving you the raw data, okay? Giving you the raw data, and you do whatever you want with it, okay? So it shows you all the velocities and is very accurate. Autocorrelation is very fast. That's what it has going for it. FFT is very accurate. That's its pro. Autocorrelation is very fast. That's its pro. It is not very accurate because it gives you average velocities. Okay. And here's the way that I like to prove it to myself. Because for me, and I'm sure like some of you, you kind of want to, you know, you'll accept something, but you kind of want to see if there's any logic behind it to really make it yours. So this is the way that I sleep at night. So here's my velocity map, and here are my colors. My towards colors and my away colors. Okay. Anything close to the baseline is slow. So red is slow, blue is slow. And we'll talk about that again on Monday. So remember, this is just as slow as this. Just because it's away doesn't mean that it's less in any shape. It's just a negative color to imply a different direction. Okay, well, we spoke about that before. And this fast is just as fast as this guy. They're just in opposite directions. Okay. Now, how slow is red? Or how fast is orange? We don't know. We don't know. You cannot tell me how slow red is. You can only tell me that that red is slower than orange, or that orange is faster than red. But where are you giving me a velocity? Right? Where are you giving me a number? It's all relative. This one is slow and this one is fast. That is why autocorrelation is not the one that's accurate. Okay, it's grouping velocities together. So imagine that you had a number line. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Imagine that you had a number line, and let's say that imagine you had a number line, and the machine said, you know what, I'm going to take, let's say these guys. I'm going to take these guys, and I'm going to take these guys. If you fall within 1, 2, 3, 4 as the velocity, you're going to be slow. And if you fall between 6, 7, 8 as my velocity, you're going to be fast. And that's it. So that red could be as slow as 1 or as high as 4, but they just called it slow. That's where they cut it off, you know? So that's how I think about these average velocities. They take things that are slow and give it one color, and things that are fast and give it another color. Okay, so that's the way I like to think about it. And then the last tip here is FFT has the word fast in its name, but it is not the one that's fast. Okay, so don't be confused by that. Don't see FFT and they ask you what's the benefit of it and you say, oh, fast. Oh, yeah, it's the one that's fast. No. Okay, so I just want to bring it to your attention. And that's it. Alrighty. Man, I feel like this one was tougher than the other one. All right, let me hit pause.